Welcome to the Climate Hour. I'm your host, Bob Grove. Today, we're going to explore India's perspective on climate change. India has now surpassed China as the world's most populous nation. That's almost 1.5 billion people living in an area 3 times smaller than the United States. To put that in perspective, a person living in the US has on average 12 times as much space as a person living in India. To put that in global perspective, 17% of the entire world's population lives in India. India has the world's 3rd largest carbon footprint after the United States and China. India produces around 2.5 billion tons of greenhouse gases annually. In fairness, on a per person basis, that's only 1/5 the average emissions of a person in China and 1/8 the average emissions of a person in the United States. But by any metric, India is one of the top 3 players in creating and reversing climate change. We're joined today on Zoom from India by RG Jetty, a nature educator, foliage outdoors, and freelance nature writer. Hi, RG.
Hello, how are you doing, Bob?
Purnima Agarkar is an environmental scientist, secretary of the Indian Network on Ethics and Climate Change, and sustainability facilitator at Leah Resource Center in Visakhapatnam and Samachit Envirotech in Pune. Hi, Purnima.
Hi, Bob. Hi, Ajit.
Hello.
So you're both based in the state of Maharashtra. That's on the western side of India. I mean, the capital of Maharashtra is Mumbai. Most people are familiar with Mumbai. It has a population of over 18 million. Is that correct?
Right. Yes.
Right. And Purnima, I know you also do work in Visakhapatnam, and as you said, you do a lot of that remotely, but a couple times a year you travel over, because that's on the far east side of India. What's that journey like from Maharashtra to Visakhapatnam?
It's a full day journey. If I have to go by flight, then I have to like mostly shift to two aircrafts. So it's a layover. There's a lot of layover time. Very rarely we get a direct flight, but the train travel is good. I didn't get an opportunity to do the train travel yet, but the train is better. Everybody says, but yes, it is 24 hours journey by train.
That's a long journey by train or by air.
Yes, and even by air, it is almost a full day. It takes to reach.
I think that's in about 1,000 kilometers, over 1,000 kilometers. The United States is about 3,000 miles wide, so we'd have to do that conversion. But just to give our U.S. listeners a perspective, think about that idea of 1/3 of the United States traveling from one side to the other. So we're here to talk about climate change, obviously. How does the average person in India perceive climate change? Arjit?
Yeah, so recently there is an increase in awareness about climate change, and due to the role of media and also TV, people to understand like it is the long-term changes in weather, long-term changes in the temperature, but the impacts of climate change are felt by all kind of people, and that's how unfortunately most of them face it. Recently there were floods in North India, so that was also attributed to climate change. So there can be 2 ways in which you can understand climate change. The first is like the definition, but the second is actually facing the impacts.
And Purnima, I mean, the idea that climate change is man-made, is that commonly accepted? Or, I mean, I know the US, we have a lot of climate deniers saying this isn't our fault, we can't fix it. How is that looked at in India?
No, in India, actually almost 50% people do believe that climate change is real and it's happening, and a very few of them do realize that it's the human activities, and they can see it actually in Pune, in my city. We can see the increasing the heat waves that we are seeing, waterlogging or flooding, like local flooding. So people have now started relating that to the change in the weather patterns as climate change impacts. Like it's no more just a natural phenomena, but it is something which has been caused by human activities, because there is a lot of clearing of forests, like local forest or green areas. A lot of them are being encroached and are being cut for obviously for more and more infrastructure, for roads, for houses. So it is people do realize that, and a lot of people have they can connect it, but if you ask them what is climate change, then they may not be able to tell you. But if you tell them that, do you think climate is changing, they will say yes, it is changing, we can see that.
So
Right.
they do see it as an issue. But they don't necessarily understand the science behind it.
Right, yes.
Right. RG, you're obviously a science writer and such. Do you see the science? I mean, the people of India. Is there a general understanding of the science within your community, or is it more difficult than that?
I think the people who are well read, I think they do understand it, but it's a bit more difficult to get that point across. Communities which maybe aren't too well versed with the subject, but many NGOs and social initiatives, they are trying to bridge that gap through education and awareness activities. So hopefully it will increase in the future, the general understanding in the public, but there is still a long way to go.
And Purnima, you kind of touched on the hotter temperatures and the flooding. How is India coping with the hotter temperatures right now? I mean, we're seeing these massive heat waves around the world, world-setting heat waves. How is India coping with that?
So in India, actually, in Pune, we are like, there is nothing great that is happening, but as a city perspective, a lot of green buildings, or a low carbon what do you say, infrastructure, like climate resilient buildings, then passive architecture, or thermal comfort. All these green building concepts are now rising. People are looking forward to these kind of eco-friendly buildings than the materials. But in other cities of India, like Ahmedabad, they came with a heat action plan. So the idea is to understand how is this the heat is heat wave is forming. What are the problems associated with, like the impacts associated with these increase in heat. And it is mostly happening in cities because of the infrastructure, because of the concrete that is being used in like everywhere. So these issues are getting highlighted now. So a lot of work is happening for towards buildings like sustainable materials, or shifting to eco-friendly housing typologies. Also, people are looking at, as I said, passive architectural concepts of cooling, rather than focusing on air conditioners or hybrid modules. So that's happening. So in India, these things are now increasing, but a lot of awareness has to still happen, because heat waves are still not considered as climate disasters. So I think only after 2016 or after 2016, it was like the disaster management agency, they thought that this should be looked at as a disaster, but it is still not looked as a climate induced disaster. So there is still a long way to go from coping perspective. But yes, people are now feeling it, and they do talk about it, that something has to be done.
Yes, and it sounds like some great changes there in terms of the passive housing and the modern ecological construction. Is that being driven by agencies, by government, or is it more the individuals taking action on that?
So, so the government has not made it mandatory. It's not a mandate, but but yes, local organizations are there. Then individuals are demanding for these housing. So we do have some certifications, which are like they complement with the government schemes. Like you can get a rebate in tax if your building is a green building, or it's a low carbon building.
Okay.
Like
So
if you
incentives,
certify that, then
yes.
yes, incentives, yes.
Yeah.
So you do get some.
Absolutely. Purnima mentioned something about the forests and stuff in the cities and stuff. Harjeet, are you seeing habitat destruction, like deforestation, such like we see do you see a lot of that in India?
Yeah, so let me open up a news article about this. So a UK-based report says that India lost like 6,60,400 hectares of forest in 5 years from up to 2020. To put that in context, only Brazil had a higher deforestation. So yes,
Wow.
deforestation is a huge problem, and from what I'm seeing, under the current regime, it is only increasing. So usually, what is the process under which deforestation occurs? So usually for projects to various industrial projects or setting up factories and those kind of things, it requires government permission and proper approval and impact assessment studies before actually it is allowed. So this whole process has been fast tracked currently with a new legislature, and due to that, actually uh, forests are degraded in a at a higher rate. So this kind of thing is happening on a large scale. Not only that, not just forest deforestation, but also grasslands, which are a very important part of the habitats
Absolutely.
and ecosystems, as they harbor a lot of endemic and endangered animals. For example, Great Indian Bustard is a very rare bird which is found in these kind of habitats. These are all now been converted into agricultural farms, and they are not the from the policy level. They are not given any protection uh, as compared to forest. So Forest Act is there to protect forest reserve, to bring the forest under reserve category, but there is no such legislature for grasslands. It is another problem which needs to be addressed, and there are now calls from from researchers and organizations to even bring grasslands under policy. So yeah, not just deforestation of forest, but also grassland is happening on a large scale. It is a big problem.
And it sounds like your grasslands are more at risk because there aren't the protections in place for them.
Yeah, yeah. So both forest and grasslands are at risk, but legally speaking, grasslands need a lot more protection than forests.
Yeah, and you mentioned factories, all the deforestation and grasslands to build factories and stuff. What about food systems in India? I mean, are you growing crops? Is that affecting the environment, or do you import most of your food? Parnima?
No, so yes, a lot of deforestation does happen for agriculture, like food production, but comparatively, it is more for the urban infrastructure and industrial development, mostly. But we don't really import a lot of food, but a lot of deforestation is happening currently. Like if I have to talk about my city specifically, so we are having deforestation at a local level on a massive scale for infrastructure projects around the river banks. So I would just like to add that, as Arijit mentioned about grasslands, so these are looked at as wastelands more than ecosystems. That is the problem, and that is why projects like infrastructure projects like riverfront developments, like they are gaining more and more importance. They don't treat the grasslands as ecosystems. They don't treat the rivers as ecosystems, and a lot of local deforestation is happening in the cities. So these kind of projects mostly affect deforestation more than agriculture, in my opinion.
I know, like Brazil and the United States, there's very, very large beef industry, meat. I mean, there's a perception, India, you're probably more vegetarian, eating a more plant-forward diet. Is that valid, RG? I mean, is the cattle issue within India like it is in other parts of the world?
It's a bit different in India with respect to cattle. So traditionally in Indian culture, cattle are revered. But livestock industry is still big in India. So we use cattle more for agricultural purposes, like in the farming itself, cattle are used. Actually, one aspect in which agriculture and livestock is might be leading to climate change is based on the so based on how the agricultural waste is dealt with. If it is not properly sanctioned, if it is not properly covered with landfills, then there is a recent study which shows that a lot of methane emissions are happening from the livestock industry. And methane, of course, as you know, is more potent greenhouse gas contributor than carbon, with respect to how much intense it is. So that is one aspect where yes, livestock industry is contributing to climate change. But with respect to beef, not too much. So in India, there is a beef ban, but some southern states do have it, but it's not as widespread as it is in the US.
Okay, so it's a little different. The food system's a little different in different parts of the world. So I understand that. Are you seeing, I know, and again, in those parts of the world where we're seeing lots of deforestation and such, and loss of wildlife habitat, this emergence of new novel viruses coming from the wilderness coast, the wild animals being pushed into greater human contact. So we see more virus spread. Are you getting any of that in India, RG?
Yes. So I recently read one paper which talked about some kind of a typhus disease, which was spread through some animals, like some small mites, which were more prevalent in grasslands. And when grasslands are invaded upon by humans, then what happens is that the probability of human contact with reservoirs of disease does increase. And yes, so more habitat destruction could lead to more diseases. We already have learned, we should have learned, I hope, a big lesson with COVID, with respect to how more habitat destruction or more human interference in animal habitats could lead to diseases. Because one of the theories of that is the transmission of disease through bats, and not just so one part is habitat destruction, but also illegal wildlife trade. That is also another source through which zoonotic diseases can spread. So the illegal meat market, which includes bats and many other mammals, that also needs to be regulated. Otherwise, we might not be far away from another outbreak of a zoonotic disease.
Are there a lot of those illegal animal trades, like in bats and stuff? Do you see a lot of those markets in India?
Yes. So the Northeast, there is a lot of illegal trafficking of pangolins and other such mammals. So through the borders is how it happens. So yes, it is a big problem in India, and there are some organizations like Traffic, which monitor this trafficking business, and also the government is also trying to crack down on this illegal trafficking. But yeah, it is a problem, definitely. And it is one of the sources, I think, of one of the possible sources of zoonotic diseases, because who knows what disease the exotic animals are having.
Absolutely. I know you mentioned the pangolins, and I know they were kind of implicated in the spread of COVID initially. So that pandemic, so that is an issue. Purnima, what's your perception on health issues caused by climate change? What do you see?
So I think that's a very big topic.
It is.
Yeah. So we recently had a workshop on mental health due to climate change impacts, because this information is so overwhelming, especially when you talk about also India and all the things happening all around the world. Like every time when you hear about this, and then the zoonotic diseases, like especially during the time of COVID, it was too overwhelming even for me to take this information as to how are we going to survive. All right. So similarly, I think health impacts, like psychological health impacts, are definitely there. People are experiencing eco-anxiety and mental health issues like irritability. But that is also because of I think increasing, like the drastic changes in the climate. like a lot of people cannot really, they don't really like the shifting, the changes in the weather that we are seeing. In Pune, a normal day looks like in the morning, sometimes it's sunny, sometimes it's raining. In the afternoon, it can be like sunny, and in the evenings it is cold. So like all the India is known for different seasons. Like we have specifically summer for 3 to 4 months, then we have monsoons, then we have the winter. But now it is like every day we are experiencing all the 3 seasons in a day. So I definitely feel it is overwhelming, and a lot of people are experiencing health issues. But the linkages to climate change, like to the climate change impacts, I think these linkages are not really happening yet. But yes, I think heat waves, due to heat waves, now it is quite evident that people are experiencing cramps, heat strokes, and headaches. So that is there. Plus the mental health issues that I was talking about. So yes, there are a lot of health concerns are there, definitely.
Yeah, I think we often overlook the mental health issues, just the stress and the mental status that we get from all of these different climate crises coming at us. So I think that's an important one to mention. I think I read recently you're having a fairly large surge in dengue fever right now. I mean, just the mosquito population larger than normal. What's happening with that? Ajit?
Yeah, so dengue is a seasonal disease which always comes up in monsoon, because that is when the mosquitoes breed. And yes, there has been an increase in the cases lately, because of monsoon and rain. There are puddles of stagnant water, but it is as much related to sanitation, as equally related to sanitation as compared to the weather also. But yes, there has been I have been a victim of dengue myself a few days back. Not a good experience. So yeah, but I think it can be preventable with better sanitation and ensuring that you don't have like stagnant water in the house. But yeah, it is a big problem, and especially in rural areas where maybe they don't have the facilities to clean the water every time. It is a big issue, especially in slums and rural areas. Yes, even in Pune, it is an issue.
Yeah.
Purnima, you mentioned flooding earlier. I mean, the flooding is obviously going to increase mosquito breeding and such. You're seeing that.
Yes, there is a rise in like in the vector-borne disease, mosquitoes, ticks, and this is affecting like everybody. Like even like in where I reside in my locality, we have a river, but because we have encroached almost half of the river, so during summer, there are hybrid mosquitoes. You have the mosquitoes are not normal sized mosquitoes, they're bigger, larger sized mosquitoes, which will not, no pest control will help you with that. So those kind of mosquitoes are there, and it's a very big issue here in my locality during monsoons also, and also during summer. So it's only during the cool time, like the winter, for whatever we have now. The winter is only for 1 or 2 months mostly. So only on those 2-3 months, I think we are in a good period. Otherwise, mosquitoes are a very big problem.
Ajit, what about the plant vegetations in India? How is climate change impacting that?
Yes, so I was recently talking to a professor and to a scientist I know, Rohan. So he actually worked, Rohan Shetty. So he actually worked on climate change effects on plant communities. So what is happening is that in the Himalayas, because of the glacial melt, there is more water available for plants, and this is causing the plant line. So the altitudes at which plants grow to go up, because depending on the because of the less ice. And what is happening is that due to glaciers melting, there are more plants because it is warmer, and it is causing the albedo to reduce. So what is albedo is how much sunlight is reflected from the ground up to the atmosphere. So plants absorb most of the heat, and then actually it creates more heat in the atmosphere. So this is one impact which is happening. The other thing which he told, which Dr. Rohan said, is that due to the increasing global temperatures, and especially also temperatures in India, it might favor the plants which are more heat resistant or drought resistant. So the species which are more sensitive to cold or more closely linked to the cold atmospheres, like pines, for example, they might suffer. Uh, these are the few things. And another thing which is happening is that due to the so some plants like rhododendron, which grows in the Himalayan region, they bloom in the early spring, so just before summer, March. But now due to climate change and even winters becoming hotter, their flowering time has now been seen even in January, which is like a winter month. So the flowering pattern is changing. Now this could cause problems to their pollination and survival, because the insects on which they depend for pollination, these insects are more active in the spring. In winter, the insects are not active. They are in a state of kind of like hibernation. So due to this early flowering, it might affect the distribution and survival of these plants, which depend on the climate for their flowering. So all these things are how plants are getting affected.
So the loss of your cold weather plants like the fir trees and stuff, and your rhododendrons flowering earlier before the insects are ready to pollinate, just kind of messing up the entire plant ecosystem.
Yes, messing up, and due to the warming weather, warming climate, plants which are more resistant to hotter climate, they might be the ones who take over, so to say.
Take over.
But
Exactly.
extremely sensitive plants might suffer. These are the possible impacts which might happen.
You're listening to the Climate Hour. I'm your host, Bob Grove. We're speaking with Arjit Jetty and Purnima Agirkar about India's perspective on climate change. So in what ways do you think climate change is unique in India? Purnima?
Yeah, actually, it's unique because India is also the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases, and it's also the most vulnerable country, because we are situated. If you look at the India's map, we are situated by oceans from almost three sides, and then we have the Himalayas at the top, and with the glaciers melting. And as we know that we are also the most populous country now, so you can imagine like the area is less, and the population is more, and plus with all these impacts that we see, like glaciers melting and sea level rising, I think we are going to have a tough time taking care of this situation in India. So we have to really come up with integrated urban development, because that is something which is also adding or kind of accelerating the problems of climate change, or the impacts that we are seeing. So in a way, both the sides, India is contributing at both the sides. So even if we have to develop ourselves, we have to shift to renewables or look at technologies that can have lesser carbon footprint and still better livelihoods, and better urban development or urban infrastructure, so that everybody can be accommodated easily. So
absolutely. Yeah, that unique position of being surrounded by the ocean on three sides and the Himalayas. I mean, it's an isolated environment, but large. I mean, we talk about the United States being 3 times larger, but it is still a very large country. But your population, I mean, just the density of your population makes it very unique. Arjit, what about you? What do you see unique about India's position in the climate crisis?
I think looking at it from ecological perspective, most of the northern hemisphere regions, they are mostly temperate and more colder. But India itself has so many different ecosystems. Different parts of India will be affected differently by climate change. I think that is bit unique to India, because the glaciers melting in Himalayas, yes, they will cause a lot of floods. But we are seeing on the Western Ghats side and in central India, a lot of heat waves and more fires which are caused by climate change. So due to the high diversity in habitats, there will be like multiple impacts of climate change. So that is a thing which is a bit unique. Yeah, so that is one thing.
What about sea level rise? I know you mentioned that, Purnima. Are you actually seeing sea level rise around areas of India? How's it affecting them?
Sorry.
I mean, how does that affect? I mean, you actually seeing building destruction or loss of property?
Yes, yes. So people are like migrating from the coastal areas, the coastal communities. They are migrating towards more central part of the country. They are doing that, especially towards I think the West Bengal side. There we can see these changes quite a lot, because and now we also see more cyclones on the western side of the country, which was not a normal scenario up till I think just in just last 2-3 years. We are seeing the frequency of cyclones have increased on the western side. So that is also causing, like livelihood destruction for people on the coastal sides. So they have to look at alternatives now and shift towards the interiors. So it's happening.
So we're actually seeing population migrations because of the
Yes.
what we call hurricanes, cyclones, sea level rise. That's happening today. That's not the future.
No, yeah, it's happening.
And again, we come back to that very, very large population. I mean, you have almost a fifth of the world's population living within your country. How does India's population inform and impact the climate policies? Arjit, can you speak to that?
I don't know specifically about population, but based on the last climate change conference, the government has made a statement that it would try to reduce emissions by 2030, or was it 2050?
No,
It was like they had
Nirima?
made the promise.
It was 2070 actually, but yes, by
2070.
2030, and we do have some levels by 2030, then 2050. But yes, largely it is by 2070, we would be like carbon neutral or climate resilient.
And one thing I am seeing is like at least for solar energy, the government is trying to push it and trying to bring out initiatives which encourage the large part of population to embrace solar energy, because of the reduced pollution and emissions which it might cause. So that is one thing. Hopefully, I am hoping that India goes forward with solar energy as opposed to coal, which is like a massive greenhouse gas contributor.
Absolutely. What was I hearing there? The 2070, that seems too late. I mean, is there a perception that that's going to fix it, or are people like you looking at going, man, we need to move quicker? Purnima?
So, actually, it was. I think it was just something that we tried to give some kind of a date. That's what we feel, that there was a pressure to give a date to go carbon neutral, and that is why we just mentioned that. But actually, the national nationally determined contributions which India signed during the Paris Agreement. So there we do have plans for 2030, 2050. the problem is, as Arijit said, that still we are very much still looking at coal as the main source of energy production, then the renewables basically. So we have not yet committed to phase out coal as such. So though we do talk about increasing our solar the solar PVs and wind energy, we are trying to do that, but we need to increase that we need to shift to the renewables to a maximum, and then whatever is surplus or whatever is extremely important, that can be on coal or other fossil fuel energy, but 80% of the energy should come from renewables, but that doesn't look like from the policies that we have
So you're still
currently.
heavily dependent on coal for your energy. Yeah. Yeah. Do you know what the current balance is? I mean, you're shooting for like 80% renewables. Where are you at now? Where's India at now?
It's less than 50%.
It's less than 50. Yeah. Renewable energy is a big one. What about transportation? I know that's a big emitter in the United States. What's transportation like? Do you see a lot of automobiles, or is there more mass transit in India? RG?
At least in Pune, it is more now, like at least in the city I live in, it's lots of people use vehicles and two-wheelers and four-wheelers. Now recently they have started a metro, which happened after a long time and after a lot of pauses. I think if people, and I have used it sometimes, I think if people do switch to that instead of four-wheelers, which are a massive polluter, there might be some reduction in the overall pollution, but it has only just started, so it's a long way to go. I can't say for sure whether it will work, but I think in like next 5 years we will come to know if metro has worked. Pune does have a bus system, but the regularity of it is a bit patchy. But many people, especially middle class and lower middle class people, do use the bus system. So that is one thing. But yeah, until the public, a large part of public don't use public transport, then pollution and all the greenhouse emissions due to transport will only increase. So yeah, I hope the metro thing works out, but let's see how it goes.
So the metro is a rail system.
In some cities, yes. So even Delhi, especially as Delhi, our capital, it has a good metro system which I used, and it is well connected. So people do use it. I don't know what is the exact breakup, like how many people use metro and how many people use cars. But in Delhi, I know it, like many people I know do use it. In Bangalore, it is also a part of the commutation system. So yeah, in some cities, metro is working well, I would say, but a long way to go. At least for Pune, way to go.
Yeah, long way to go. Purnima, the train systems, are they still primarily fossil fuel diesel, or are you starting to see more electric trains? Purnima?
Trains, yeah. So I'm not sure actually. The metros
Okay.
are, I think they are EV, electric trains. But we do have a lot of EV electric buses now.
Cool.
Like the Pune does plan to have more of EVs and electric buses. But metro, I'm not sure. I somehow missed it. But yes, a lot of focus is now on mass transit, and that is electric. Like it's shifting to electric vehicles. But there's also like it's really very complicated. We also have, like, it's funny actually, in Pune we have flyovers and we also have metros on top of flyovers. So it's like, it's your choice. So if you have a four-wheeler or a two-wheeler, which most of the people in Pune have, so they would definitely prefer to go by a flyover than going by a metro. because again, because for metro, then you have to, the feeder systems for metro are not yet established well. So if you are going by a metro, then you have to get down and take another local transport like an auto rickshaw or some bus, some kind of vehicle to reach to your final destination. So a person, like most of the people in Pune own private vehicles, either a 4-wheeler or a 2-wheeler. So every Puneite, every person has a 2-wheeler. So he would definitely prefer to go by the flyover than a metro. So when we talk about sustainable transport, we do say that, okay, if you have a flyover, then probably it will be a good idea to not have a metro over a flyover. Okay, let people use the flyover, and wherever there is no flyover, there maybe a metro can, have a better, provide a sustainable solution. So this is like, it's really complicated. The urban development, we don't understand where it is going. We are also like, we do talk about it, that something is really messy here. It's
So we're
complicated.
talking about freeways, highways, taking that personal vehicle instead of getting on the metro and riding the mass transit. We have the same issue in the United States. People love their cars, mostly 4-wheelers in the United States, but it's just easier to jump on that and drive to your destination than it is to go to the train station and get on the train. But it's something we all need to work on for the environment. RG?
So I did find something about trains. From Economic Times, they said that 37% are diesel, but the others are electric, the trains which are used. So that is actually a good thing, that most of them are electric. So I just found it recently, so I wanted to add that.
So 37% are diesel, you said. So that means the majority is actually electric, which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then again, India has a lot of power outages. So when that happens, the whole system goes into a mess. But yes, electric is definitely better than diesel and petrol for sure.
I can imagine. Purnima?
Sorry. No, I just wanted to add that also the electric charging happens on fossil fuel based energy, not a renewable energy. So it's not a 100% solution, but still I think we are heading to it.
Yeah, and even charging your electric vehicle from a fossil fuel power, that's still better for the environment because it's just more efficient. So the electric vehicle is good whether you have fossil fuel power or renewable power. So moving in the right direction now.
Yeah, another thing with respect to electricity, I forgot to add, is that India does have a lot of hydropower. So dams and using water power to produce electricity, especially in Maharashtra, my state, Pavna Dam is there, then Thokarwadi Dam. All these do provide, and of course, Bhatgar Dam. All these do provide electricity to cities in and around the western part of Maharashtra. So that is one thing which is better than fossil fuels. But then with dams, the problem is how they disturb river systems and affect the fish diversity and other diversity. But with respect to greenhouse gases, yes, hydropower is.
So hydroelectric is big. That's good. Are you seeing, or is there some sort of nuclear power in your mix in India?
Nuclear power, some of them are there. I forgot where it was.
So that's
there are
a smaller.
some places in Maharashtra where nuclear power is there, and some places in India, but I don't think it's as big as coal or hydroelectric.
Yeah.
But some places do have nuclear power plants.
Okay, so let's talk about solutions a little bit. What can India do about climate change? I mean, what is your direction, Purnima?
So we realize that as even Arijit said, that India is very unique. They have different ecosystems within the country, and so a very localized, like what we are doing right now is conducting localized vulnerability assessments to understand which areas are more vulnerable to and for which impacts, which localized impacts, and accordingly derive local action plans, local climate action plans, instead of national level, like we have national climate action plans, but it's very difficult to even understand those plans and how to implement those. So in order to implement them on ground, we need local climate action plans, for which we are doing those. And one of the assessments is vulnerability assessments at a micro level. We do have vulnerability assessments at the district level, but at the micro level, it's required, because again, the microclimatic conditions are different than the overall country's conditions. And apart from that, we're also looking at a lot of local initiatives or like local technologies that are already resilient, or they have worked for the people in that area, and they have kind of made themselves resilient in a way. So these local technologies are not being highlighted at the national level for some reason. Like maybe because, as I said, that localized action is something which is missing in our like policies. So we are kind of trying to be the connecting link. We are trying to link these local initiatives to the national goals or national contributions that we have. So I think that is one of the solutions to upscale these local initiatives, or to understand how they are helping local climatic conditions. And if they are helping, then how can we upscale them or kind of replicate them, if it is possible, in areas where people are not really doing much, or they are trying to find solutions. So something on those lines.
Yes, thank you. Ajit, you're a science writer. What kind of research are you seeing on climate change?
Yeah, so I was recently looking at research on how climate change affects migration patterns of birds, for example. So climate change impact on wildlife is one research aspect which is happening. So I recently read a paper on, so India gets a lot of winter migrants of birds in the during the winter months, and climate change is actually affecting the timing of when they arrive. Due to the increased heat in the winter, it is causing them to change their timings and disturbing their cycle. Another research is happening is how climate change is affecting the poor communities, especially floods and all those climate disasters. How are they affecting? So some research is happening on the social aspect also. But one thing I wanted to add about solutions is I think education and awareness is important. So as a nature educator and environment writer, I try to bring about awareness with respect to climate change and environment amongst the public. So recently, I had conducted a session on how to calculate your own carbon footprint using a simple website. And some people had participated in that, and like I told them how to reduce their own emissions by reducing like the electricity they use. For example, a simple thing is, especially for urban people, is simple things like putting full loads in your washing machine instead of half loads. That is one thing which actually saves your electricity. Indirectly, you are actually reducing the footprint. Traveling by foot when necessary is another thing. Actually, I was in the US for 1 year, and I found this traveling on foot thing very difficult because the roads there are not designed for pedestrians. But in India, a lot of people do that, traveling by foot, and that is one simple way actually in which you reduce transport emissions. So yes, education and awareness, I think, is one important aspect of the more you educate the public, the more steps they will take to reducing the footprint and becoming more resilient. So I think that is one thing which needs to be done on a much larger scale to bring about changes in the climate resilience.
I think particularly, again, with the population, there's just so many people in India. So if you adopt those policies,
Yeah.
washing or walking, those simple things that people can do, that could have a huge impact in places like India.
Especially, I think one environment educator I was talking with made an interesting point that actually the people who use the most AC or use the most air conditioners, people use the most cars, they're actually the richer sections of society. maybe they should be targeted more with respect to awareness, because they are the ones who might be causing the most kind of emissions. So in the like in the future, yes, hopefully a change is brought about in their behavior also, which might lead to the reduction in their own footprints. That is one thing which could be targeted.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, we talk about climate equity in the United States, that, the rich have the largest carbon footprint and the poor suffer the most from it. So that is something we all need to be aware of. Purnima?
I just wanted to add that regarding the awareness sessions that he's talking about, just we do conduct monthly awareness sessions on what could be a climate-friendly lifestyle. So there we do talk about carbon footprints, individual carbon footprints, but then the thing that we stress on is there is very limited scope when it comes to individuals. We can have a lifestyle. We can definitely walk, or you prefer using mass transit. But then again, it depends on the individual. Sometimes it's not feasible for somebody to take a bus or walk. Maybe using his private vehicle is the most preferred option at that time. So there is very little that can be done at an individual level, but yes, it can be, it should be done. But at the same time, at the community level, we can do a lot of things by demanding better facilities, or like if I really if I want to, if I should take a bus because a bus is a more climate friendly option, then the buses should have a specific time. The frequency should be good. Then there has to be less traffic on the road so that I reach on time. So all these parameters should also be met at the same time. So at the community level, we kind of empower the people to take actions at the community level, advocate for better policies, and demand for sustainable choices. Because unless the public demands, I think that these things won't change. The more it's always like our policies are governed or driven by people, like whatever people demand, that's what we get. So why not demand for green technologies or eco-friendly lifestyles or better urban facilities, urban infrastructure? So that's one thing that that we also urge people to do.
Absolutely. How can the world engage with India on climate? Purnima?
Okay, look in the world. I think by funding, by providing funds.
So is that a difficult question? Is that a big question?
Yeah, it is actually, but yes. So looking at the kind of infrastructure that we are looking at, I think a lot of funding needs to be done. On like overall, like the global south is actually suffering, and the global north, it has been that the kind of conversation. So I think if it is possible, then in order to take care of the loss and damages, I think the rest of the world can probably contribute in funding the country for better practices, better policies, of course, after reviewing, but that is one thing that can be, that is what I see like immediately.
Arjit, how do you see the world engaging with India to make things better?
I think bringing forth more partnerships for reducing emissions. So, for example, methane treaty had happened recently. India, I don't think is a part of it, which is not a good thing. But taking forward these kind of large level collaborations, and also I think I had a background in animal ecology research also, so I think more collaborative research is needed on how climate change affects the habitats. I don't think India is doing like a ton of research on that. Some of it is happening, yes, but more research will only help us understand how it affects the environment and society better. So I think in US and Europe, a lot more research has happened. So more collaborations between scientists of these regions will also be more helpful.
Thank you. Thank you both for joining us today. Where can our listeners go to learn more about your work website? Purnima?
Yes, I can share my website. Like, can I share it?
No, we can't
Over
do a share. Just tell us what it is.
INECC.net. That's the one. And other one is Laya Resource Center. So there's a website for that as well. And Samuchit Envirotech. So all these 3 organizations have their websites. We are there on all the social media handles, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and also on LinkedIn. And we keep posting about our work timely on these platforms. So we are also very connected socially with everybody all around the world.
Okay, thank you. Now, Jeet, where can our listeners go to see some of your work?
Yeah, so I've added one Google Drive link in the chat. So maybe you
Our
can
listeners
edit
can't
the
see the
website.
chat. Our listeners can't see the chat. So what is
Okay,
that?
okay. So yeah, I write a blog on nature and environment. So it's called Footy and Nature at blogspot.com. So on that website, I write about my observations and thoughts on nature, especially wildlife and also environment. And I did appear on the Talaterra podcast with Tanya, who is our mutual friend. So you can also go to the Talaterra, TALATERRA.com website to listen to my the podcast I appeared on, where I talked about my journey in writing about the environment and as a freelance science writer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. And thank you to our listeners. We welcome your questions and feedback. You can learn more about the Climate Hour at climatehour.net. That's climatehour.net. This is the Climate Hour. I'm your host, Bob Grove.